I think we've got a good pair of inspiring figures for you who don't just have the ideas and the ideals, but they've also had the skills and the determination to make the long march through the institutions to realise those ideas and make things happen. But I just wanted to set the scene a little bit and tell you why I jumped at the opportunity for us to be involved in this event. As Terence was saying, I lead a network of UK city region transport authorities, Transport for London, Transport for Greater Manchester, Transport for West Midlands, the equivalents in the other big cities, to learn from each other, to make the case for urban transport, and to look ahead to what's next, to join the dots between where we are now and where we might be in the future. Personally, my background is in campaigning. I've never done anything else in my entire working life, and I used to do a lot, like a lot of people here, and do things at the weekends for nothing, because like a lot of you, something about me just thought, I don't want to put up with having transport policies that just don't make sense. I want to live in a world, I want to live in cities which are for people, which are much more better and more interesting places to be, greener, more equitable. And I think that's what Living Streets is about, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to be involved. And I said also that one of our jobs as the Urban Transport Group is to look at what's next, what's coming up. And I think what's next is walking. I think it's walking's turn to get the attention. And I think about active travel and cycling and see where that's come from. 10 years ago, cycling was completely fringe. It wasn't fashionable. It was naff, basically. And look where it's come. I remember coming to London and when TfL were making the first moves on cycling, and we had presentations about things called cycling cafes, and I was thinking, cycling cafes, come on, that might work in Shoreditch, but we're talking about Manchester and Leeds and Birmingham here, you must be joking, just talk about the basics. And now I live in York and there's a flipping cycling cafe on every other street. So it shows how things can change. And I want to do my bit. I get bored when we've already won some battles of ideas. I want to do my bit to help walking to get the attention it deserves, and that's why I said to Joe, I want to sponsor this, but also said to Joe, I want to work in Living Streets and find ways in which we can do more things in partnership to give walking policy attention it deserves. I've got 3 observations, provocations for you before I bring the speakers in. My first observation, provocation, is I think walking needs to get a bit more rock and roll. It needs to get a bit cooler. It needs to be a bit less wholemeal. It needs a bit more of an edge. It needs a bit more of a bite. And that isn't everything we need to do, of course. But going back to my cycling analogy, how that's got a cultural resonance. And I think, who has actually read Susan's book Towards the Walking World? Oh, come on. Right, so you should all get that, because I think that's got lots of examples, as you saw on the screen. Eric's got loads of money. I'm sure they can get you free copies, because that's got loads of great ideas about how you can make walking get more of that cultural resonance. And it's all, I mean, I've got this thing on my wrist here, 10,000 steps. That's walking, isn't it? And it shows how you can get some of these ideas through. My second provocation and challenge is a challenge back to my members, really. A challenge back to the city regions. A lot of the documents that come out around transport policy in the city regions talk the talk, they say all the right things, they're all starting to talk about healthy streets and all this kind of thing now. But look at the back, look at the annex about what the money is being spent on, and the pie charts don't look quite so good in terms of walking. A lot of it will still be a lot of big roads, public transport, and then right at the end, some of the softer measures. It's great to see London changing that balance a bit. We heard about Manchester changing it, Scotland is, but I think the challenge back to the other city regions is to follow that. And the third thing, the final thing, because I'm supposed to be chairing it while talking, so the third provocation challenge is, I think, more about the future of streets. I go to a lot of meetings. I could be in a room with a load of bus people and they'd be saying, the thing about streets is that we should all have dedicated bus lanes down them, otherwise the bus is doomed, there is no future. Go to cycling and it's all about segregated cycle lanes. The freight and logistics people, they need to deliver the taxis. Now, we can't meet all these different demands for segregated space within the same road space. And I think we need a debate about the future of the streets, how we can synthesise some of this stuff, how, as Susan was saying, we can use technology. Why is it all about a battle for where the white paint line goes on the street in a digital age? But that seems to be a lot of the battles. And I want to work with Living Streets and others to try and get a debate about what the future of that space between the buildings looks like, a more imaginative debate rather than a battle between the various lobbies, which people like me end up trying to mitigate and balance. So, I'll shut up and introduce our first speaker, Lynda Addison, Chair of the CIHT Sustainability Transport Panel, Chair of the Transport Planning Society, and Advisor to the Campaign for Better Transport. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much indeed for the introduction, and I think what Jonathan has just said gives an excellent start to what I was going to say, which is we've got all these modes, and how do we make a decision about what space goes to whom? And that's, in a sense, what I and my colleagues do as transport planners and as town planners. We're about how you actually utilise space and make space fit for people and places fit for people. So that's what I'm going to talk about. But actually, I want to start at the top, because I think if we're going to change the way that walking is perceived, and you've heard all the benefits, and as an ex-Living Streets trustee, I'm very, very proud of all the work that's been going on walking by Living Streets. But we have to start at the top. And one of the things I'm going to be talking about is the National Planning Policy Framework, because that's just been produced this week, a new draft. And notwithstanding what Rupert said this morning, I think there's a lot of work to do, and I'll come back to that. So we have to convince politicians. We had an excellent example of a politician who's convinced in Pascal. But I have to say a lot of politicians in this country need a lot of convincing from the top to the bottom in terms of organisations. So we have to work at the top as well as the bottom. Living Streets has produced an extremely powerful document, I think, with their seven steps to achieve change. And I think it's an essential blueprint for everybody, whether you're working in local government, central government, or as an activist. It should become the foundation for every planning policy document that is done, whether it's neighbourhood or whether it's the local plan or the strategic plan. Because what is very clear from all the work that we've seen, from the examples that we've seen where places have been retrofitted, it is incredibly difficult to retrofit places. It's very expensive. So actually, given the scale of development that's going on in this country, why don't we get it right to start with, rather than having to worry about retrofitting? So if we can get the planners and the transport planners who actually plan our spaces and our places, and we get the politicians, we should be able to get it right first time. But they need to own this agenda. They need to have those set of values. So part of the job of activists like yourselves and Living Streets and anybody else who's keen on this agenda is to consistently, coherently and continuously, from the bottom to the top of any organisation, whether it's national government or neighbourhood planning or parish councils, actually push this agenda through time after time after time in every level and every way they can, both from the strategic policy and vision right through to the detail. So I don't know whether most of you have registered. It is 20 years since we had a white paper which instigated a transport deal for everybody, better for everybody. It's the first white paper that was produced that talked about sustainable travel choices. It was the first white paper that talked about the integration of planning and transport. Here we are, 20 years later. Have we made progress? I have to say my view is no, we haven't. We haven't really changed our approach to what we do. We haven't actually started with making sure people have real choice about how they travel. And we haven't responded very effectively to all the issues that are pressing on us, whether it's the health agenda, the environmental agenda, the IT revolution. So we need to take action, and we need to take it urgently, given the scale of growth and change that's taking place in this country. Every city and every village is growing and changing quite phenomenally, and that's going to increase, and the speed is going to increase, so we need to act now. I thought it would be quite helpful for all of you to know what, in a sense, the professional bodies are doing very quickly. What CIHT is doing, that's the Chartered Institute of Highways and Transport. We've got a key priority agenda, which is to promote the integration of planning and transport, so you get better planning and better transport. We are going to be responding, I hope, with all other stakeholders, and I do hope Living Streets is going to be part of this, to the new National Planning Policy Framework, because it is not much better, and I'll come back to that, in the context of planning and transport. We are also producing new guides to try and help local authorities, activists and other players in this world to see what to do and how to do it to get the system better, so we can change fast. As far as Transport Planning Society is concerned, again, we're looking at the principles of what we should be doing. We're trying to change the methodologies. At the moment, most of the methodologies that local authorities use and developers use and consultants are what's called predict and provide. In other words, we predict the amount of traffic, and I say traffic, it's traffic that's predicted, not transport or movement. We predict traffic and then we provide for it. What the TPS is trying to do, and it's working with the Department for Transport and others, is to go, that's not the way to go. That's not how things are going to get better. We need vision and validate. What's your vision? What do you want in terms of people and places? And then how do you get it? Much better way around. And obviously we're looking at practice and education and what we can do there. And what I'm also going to say is we're going to do something this year which I hope that you as activists will be part of. We're going to have a process leading towards a transport planning day to try and get transport planning on the agenda, because transport planning is one of the ways we make that choice about how modes are treated. So I really hope that you're all going to be part of that in one way or another. So watch this space, more information will come later. So I think there are 9 levels of action that need to be taken, at least as a start, and they need to be taken now. All of us need to respond to the National Planning Policy Framework, and the fact it's still talking about you can't refuse planning applications unless the transport impact is severe. Still there. We'd hoped it would go. You need to be making sure that every strategic plan, every local plan, is actually including within its objectives, its policies, doing its evidence-based, its programmes and action, where walking is at the core of the transport mode. So it's got to be built into every plan and every policy. And we need to make sure the methodologies that are being used as part of that planning process are fit for purpose, not predict and provide. One of the ways that local authorities ensure expenditure is available for the delivery of schemes, where it is a scheme that's required rather than behaviour change perhaps, is through infrastructure delivery plans. So we need to make sure that walking goes into those infrastructure delivery plans as part of the local planning process. And that every neighbourhood plan, if you're part of a neighbourhood plan, includes transport, looks at where you want walking, make sure you fight and you put it into the plan. And it goes through the referendum or the examination in public as appropriate. So every level that we're working on is actually activated in terms of what we can do. So it's action, 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 by all of you, by all of us, because we've left it too long. We've got a problem that's growing, whether it's a health problem or whether it's a mitigation problem we're going to face. We've left it much too long, so we need to act now. I mentioned the new MPPF draft. It's got good points and it's got bad points, and I'm not going to go through all of these, but I'm just highlighted some of them, which you will be able to see when you access the presentation. It's still got a lot of strength in terms of the importance of sustainable development. It's saying an awful lot about local authority-led land allocations, healthy lifestyles, the importance of mode choice, the importance of actually also considering transport early. So a lot of the general statements are there and the principles are there. But then you come to the detail and that's when it falls down, both in terms of the detail of the National Planning Policy Framework, but also the way it gets applied. So that's what needs tackling. And one of the ways of tackling it is to make sure these local plans and neighbourhood plans, which will be given status and do have status, actually deal with what you want to achieve and have the right vision and objectives. At the core of many of the problems that we're facing in terms of walkability, and I'm talking obviously not cities necessarily, but across the country, we get the location of development in the wrong place. It is development-led, developer-led quite often, and it's nowhere near anywhere you could walk to. It's a housing estate out wherever. And so I think one of the core things we have to tackle is making sure that development's in the right location, and that we ensure that everybody has a choice of mode of travel and the ability to walk to services. So I think persistent action by activists in the planning world will start to deliver that, because, as Pascal was saying, politicians will listen. So you really need to make the case loud and continuously that you need development in the right place so you can deliver walkability. And then it needs to ensure that actually we build those policies into the practice that happens on the ground, whether it's the Section 106 agreements, whether it's the long-term investment plans through the community infrastructure levy. We have to do that. But part of the process, and it was interesting that some of the things that Susan was talking about, because I think if we're going to change people's minds, the non-activists, the people who want their cars as opposed to walk, we've got to have the information and we've got to be incredibly persuasive. So I think everybody needs to get the information that they can use to try and persuade the non-believers at the moment to change their views. At a neighbourhood level, I think there's a real opportunity working from the bottom up. So I said right at the beginning we need to look at the top, but you need to look at the bottom as well, and they'll come together hopefully over time. But we need to make sure every neighbourhood plan builds into it spatial walking networks that are fit for purpose and that go to places that people want to go to and are pleasant, as everybody has said, to use. You don't want to use a car because you can walk. So that's the sort of thing that could be done at a local level very easily. One of the other things I think is very important that everybody gets involved in, and the activists, is the transport plans and investment strategies that underpin the strategic plans and local plans. That they should be led by the vision in the local or strategic plan. What they need to do then is specify the issues that exist for every mode of transport, and they need to look at the as if, I've got a spelling error, not as if, and could be scenarios, so that we could see where we could go if we really set our mind to it, and then what we need to do to achieve it. And I think a lot of what you've heard today has been, certainly I found it, aspirational and inspirational. And that's, in a sense, where we need to be. We need to be both aspirational and inspirational and get people to listen and get information on walking networks as well as cycling networks and public transport networks built into those transport strategies, and then ensure that it's monitored very effectively through the review process, and that we do see behavioural change, that we do see modal change. So every local plan and every neighbourhood plan could be aspirational in terms of having a mode, whether it's walking, cycling, well, across all modes, that they're trying to aspire to a lot more walking. You've heard statistics today about walking levels in London and elsewhere. We need to set the benchmark very high and aim for it. Even if we don't get there, aim for high. Aim to try and get there somewhere else. And use that as a way of trying to persuade the politicians and the professions to do it. And I think it was Susan that mentioned piece by piece. Incremental change is actually essential. It doesn't matter how small. Everything we do is building on it. It's like a big jigsaw. We keep just putting pieces in. It gradually we'll get the full picture, I hope. Hopefully not too gradually, perhaps fast. So apart from the levels I've talked about, one of the other major areas where there is real problems at the moment, and it's certainly been shown up by some work that the Foundation for Integrated Transport is doing, which is a sort of under the auspices of the Campaign for Better Transport. They've been doing some research looking at the actual what's happening in the ground in terms of modal share and transport and how well the new developments that have taken place over the last 10 years. I didn't realise it was going to do that. That's interesting. Obviously my computer's got skills that I haven't got. That's what my brain's doing at this precise moment. It's very important, and the research is shown from FIT that most of the new developments that have taken place over the last 10-15 years have taken no account of modal choice, have taken no account of people travelling in any other way than by car. So one of the things we really need to do is make sure that every planning application doesn't go down that route. And we're going to deal with a lot of major housing applications very shortly. So again, it's about the methodology, being vision and validate. It's about making the case that your policy is very strong on walking. And one of the things that's very clear in the new PPF is the local plan strategies and policies and your neighbourhood, approved neighbourhood plans and strategies will have weight. So it's a matter of getting the right things in those documents so that then they can be translated when the applications come in and they can be refused. And the implications hopefully will be demonstrated as severe. So rigorous and robust is what we need to be. And so we might feel as though we're pushing a rather large stone or elephant or anything else up a hill. I certainly feel as though I'm doing that. I've been doing this for about 40 years. And certainly I'm not making much progress with the donkey. But this is a call to arms, and it's a call to arms urgently now. We can succeed. We will succeed, but all of us have got to be incredibly active, rigorous and persistent. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, just to introduce, I'm sure you know Lucy anyway, but a public health expert and working with various institutions in London to embed the Healthy Streets approach across the capital. Lucy.
So, I'm talking about prioritising health in planning, and I'm using my experience with the Healthy Streets approach. And towards the end, I'll be talking about some tools which I've developed, and I work with Transport for London. I work a lot with advocacy organisations and authorities and organisations in London. But for those of you who are outside of London, I write all of this with every village and every town and every city in my mind. And all these tools are transferable to anywhere else. So gloss over the pictures of the mayor, because you can just put whoever's face you want in that space and look at what the content is, because it's really important that we're all talking together consistently about the same things and using the same tools. So if you think that these might be useful, please don't be put off by the fact they might have a bit of a London veneer on them. So I've been on a little bit of a journey over the last few years. I first started working with Transport for London in 2013, and in 2014 the Healthy Streets approach, which I had developed, was adopted into Transport for London policy. And this year we have a new London plan has been published, and our final Mayor's Transport Strategy will be out shortly with the Healthy Streets approach as the framework for those documents. So I've learned a few things about what the key steps are, I guess, in terms of embedding health in planning, and I'll be talking about those. So first of all, when you're a public health professional, people come to you with a lot of different health issues. Everything relates to health, and you can't do everything. So this is also true in the sphere of public realm and streets, walking, cycling, and transport. and it's really important to pick really the key most important issues. So these in our towns and villages and cities in the UK are the big 5 health impacts, and for me these are the important ones for us to focus on. Physical activity, road traffic injuries, air quality, noise and severance. And they all relate to how we use our street space and how we manage motorised transport in our towns and villages and cities. So I'd say first of all it's really key to stick with those priority issues and not stray into a lot of other areas to be impactful. Secondly, you can get yourself tied up in knots if you have these 5 priorities, because someone will say, is air quality more important than road traffic injuries? Is physical activity more important than noise? If I do this, what will be the impact of that on these other health impacts? So you have to put them together into a framework that makes it really easy for the people who you want to change what they're doing to do things differently and to know what it is that you want them to do differently. So the framework that I developed was the Healthy Streets approach. And this takes those 5 main health impacts and translates it into what is the experience like for a person on a street. And if you change what the experience is like for a person on a street, then you will be addressing those 5 main health impacts and reducing inequalities. So if you're not familiar with these 10, I should say that most of the content that I'm talking about here and the tools and the documents are all on healthystreets.com, so you can go to that website if you want to read more about it and read more about these indicators. Thirdly, I said I've been working with Transport for London since 2014. I would say that there's been a big shift since our new mayor came into his role in 2016. So having a champion for the work that you're trying to do makes a really, really big difference. So Sadiq Khan in October 2016 published A City for All Londoners, and in this he said that he would be taking the Healthy Streets approach forward with Transport for London and across all of his statutory strategies, and that makes a really big difference in terms of embedding health in the planning process, not just across the transport sector but across all sectors working together. It's important to have a vision so that people can see where it is that you're trying to get to, what it is that you're trying to achieve, and that all different organisations can rally together around a shared vision. So in February of last year, this document was published, Healthy Streets for London. We've got plenty of hard copies available over on the table if you want to take one of those. And this document was quite important as a shift in emphasis in a number of ways. So it put people and their health at the heart of decision making. Now, in the way that we use our public spaces, as you've seen from all of the talks so far today, people and their health are not being put first in decision making. And so to do that, to really take this seriously and do this, it requires a total rethink of how we do things and how we make decisions. This was a really clear and bold statement about a movement away from private car use, which is really what is needed to unlock all of those benefits. There are 3 levels for delivering the Healthy Streets approach, which you can read more about in the document. And importantly, we said that we will start measuring our success not by the traditional measures that we've used in the past, but by seeing how we're doing in terms of our 10 Healthy Streets indicators and whether we're improving on those. Now, lots of people write visions, but a lot of those visions don't really go anywhere. They only go somewhere if you turn a vision into a plan. And in London, there's been a process over the last year and a half where each of the mayor's statutory strategies has been embedding Healthy Streets into the plan for what we're going to do next. So obviously, the transport strategy is going to have Healthy Streets as the framework, because people can see from the name streets that it's got something to do with transport. But streets aren't just about what the transport sector can do, they're also about what the health sector can do, and they're about what the spatial planning policies are going to be delivering, and how that space is going to be policed, and how we're going to regenerate areas of London differently, and how we're going to embed different practices to enhance the culture of our city. So all these strategies have got the Healthy Streets approach embedded in them. The Mayor's transport strategy is probably the most important, though, of those in terms of some really clear direct policies that are going to be delivering the Healthy Streets approach. And this document splits the 3 levels of delivering healthy streets into 3 chapters. So the first chapter says we're going to change the way that our streets look and feel by doing things that make our streets look and feel different and make them much more enjoyable places to walk and cycle and access public transport. The second chapter says we can only really get people to stop using their cars for longer journeys if we make our public transport services better in those areas where people have poor access to public transport. So we're going to look at our public transport services and how people can shift away from car to public transport for longer journeys and away from car to walk and cycle for their shorter journeys. And then the third chapter is really about the spatial planning aspect of it. So making sure that new developments that happen in this city are high density, that they're well connected with public transport, that they're mixed use, they have low car parking and high cycle parking, and they've got good public realm around them and they're walkable environments. And a number of ambitious targets have been set in this strategy. The mode share target is saying that we're going to increase the proportion of trips done walking, cycling and by public transport to 80% by 2041. And that means that almost all car trips in some parts of London are going to be eliminated. So parts of central London have already got higher than an 80% mode share, so they have to go even further beyond that target. For me, the most exciting target of all of the targets in this strategy is the physical activity target, because this is the first time that a transport authority with no statutory public health responsibilities has said we take full responsibility for how physically active people are in our city, because we understand the difference between whether someone is active or whether they're inactive is whether they walk or cycle in a given day. And so therefore we're going to be taking on that responsibility to deliver the physical activity benefits, which will mean that we have a massive drop in premature death, massive improvements in health. And we're going to do it through switching the people who are inactive to becoming active. So we're not just going to be counting the number of people walking along a street. We're going to be looking at who are the people who weren't walking before, who are walking now. And that's really important in terms of accessibility, because it's about making sure that our streets are welcoming to everyone and to the people who currently don't feel that they can walk. It's a much harder ask than just increasing the number of people that you see walking on a given street. Now, the London Plan, it's out at the moment, and I really urge you to respond, if you haven't done already, in support of the Healthy Streets policies that are in the London Plan policies. This says that they're going to use Healthy Streets approach, and this is a really key piece in the puzzle that we've been talking about of delivering the change that we need. It's getting our new developments right and making them healthy from the outset. And then the long-term 25-year action plan has to be chunked up into smaller pieces of things that we're actually going to do. So the first one of these is the Transport for London business plan. This is published on an annual basis and says this is the money that we've got and this is what we're going to spend it on. And it starts taking the first steps in delivering those long-term goals. Now, this is the bit that I think those of you in the last 10 rows are going to wish that you'd sat nearer the front, because I've been at the back and I know you can't see anything back there, because I'm going to talk about some of the tools that might be useful to you. So we have this thing called the Healthy Streets Toolkit. You see, you can't see this already, I can see you straining. And these I think will be really helpful to you. The first document, if you're interested in healthy streets and have never heard anything about it before, the first thing to look at is the Guide to the Healthy Streets Indicators. Now, there's a number of reasons why this is the first thing to look at. First of all, it's really easily digestible because it's got 2 pages describing each of the 10 Healthy Streets indicators, so it's not some enormous tome that you have to wade through like the draft London Plan or the Mayor's Transport Strategy. Secondly, it's got lots of pictures in it. So that helps as well, because you basically only have about 10 pages of text, and the text that is in there is just a list of key questions. It's basically, in my professional world, this would be called a health impact assessment, but it just gives you a number of prompt questions for each indicator to ask yourself, how does this street perform in relation to this particular Healthy Streets indicator? So you can use it on any street to assess how it is, and you can also use it to apply to any proposal or plan to say, how is this proposal or plan going to deliver healthy streets in this location? The next tool is the Healthy Streets Check for designers. And this one is not for the faint-hearted, because it's not a tool designed for campaigners and advocacy organisations. It's a tool that's designed for technical specialists and engineers to use. But you can make sure that they give you the results of the tool and that they show them to you and that you can interpret the results. So here's a little example. So this spreadsheet, which is up in the top right-hand corner, you can fill it in for a street to see how healthy the street is against the 10 healthy streets indicators. So this example here is Archway Junction in North London, and the picture in the top left-hand corner is what it looked like before. And the blue ring in the middle of the healthy streets diagram shows you how that street scored by this technical assessment before any changes were made. And then the picture below shows how that junction looks now. And this is what Will Norman was talking about earlier with the church service in the street. And the red line shows you how that street performed after the changes have been made. So what this means is that now, before we dig up any roads, before we spend any money, we can do some kind of assessment to see what the benefit is going to be for people of making this change. And it will flag up some issues that maybe we need to have a further think about, and it's got a lot of important points in it in relation to making the environment better for people who are walking and spending time in streets. The heat calculations you may or may not have heard of before, but it's a tool that's available online for you to monetize the health benefits of a project. And this is just one example from Hackney, where just using a simple count of people walking and cycling through the junction, it was possible to see what the monetized health benefit was. And of course, unsurprisingly, the monetized health benefit paid for the cost of the project about 5-fold in the first year that it was delivered. So a really compelling case for more walkable environments. Healthy Streets Survey. This is an on-street survey tool where we have been going out onto streets and asking 100 people at random to rate the street they're standing on there and then against the 10 indicators. How noisy do you find this street right here, right now, between 0, very noisy, and 10, not at all noisy? How safe do you feel between 0, not at all safe, 10, very safe? And what we didn't know when we did these surveys, first of all, was whether if you made a change to the street and went back again a few years later, you'd get a different result from another random 100 people you stopped on the street. But this example here is Portsmouth Road in Kingston. They made some changes to make the street better for walking and cycling, and the results on the right-hand side show that after we'd made the changes, the 100 people we stopped at random rated the street much more positively than the 100 people we had stopped at random before the changes were made. So people could feel the difference. And this can be quite an important tool for getting communities on board with bringing about change that might be a bit scary. And this one I think will really excite you. Small Change, Big Impact is a toolkit for making light touch and temporary changes on streets. So the kind of things that Brenda was talking about earlier, and also Susan, these can really be the first step in transforming local streets, is doing something that's temporary or light touch. And this toolkit talks you through how to secure funding, how to go through the approvals processes, how to get the support that you need, and some of the hurdles you might have to overcome in that process. And it also includes a huge range of examples from around the UK that should give you some inspiration if you're short of ideas on what will be the best solution for your local street. And that's it, a very quick whistle-stop tour through some tools which I hope that you'll find helpful. Thank you.
Okay, well, we've not got long before we're terminated, so let's have some questions, observations from the floor. Let us know who you are and where you come from, because we're all nosy. Lady there, gentleman there.
Hi, I'm Katie from Hertfordshire. I've been a school travel planner for 10 years, and I don't know if this is working very well. And before that, I was an active parent, and that's how I got into this. So my question is for Lynda. How can the bridge between those of us who've done school travel over these years be improved with the colleagues in transport planning because I still feel after 10 years that there's a huge divide and that people don't take the work. Those of us who are working with schools have done really well, but people don't seem to have made the connection that parents are actually business leaders, politicians, shop owners or whatever, and they can actually influence the rest of the world. Sorry.
Thank you.
Going on.
Just take the gentleman here.
I'm Andrew Stuck. I run the Museum of Walking and I'm the podcaster under talkingwalking.net. A couple of opportunities seem to present themselves. One is housing demand and the other is the London as a national park city. And I'd quite like to find out what your thoughts are on those two opportunities. With housing demand, when I worked in a local authority in Wiltshire, what we did was we valued every car park in the county, which revealed just how valuable to the owners of those car parks they would be if they were housing. I wonder whether that's something that could be adopted in London.
Okay, we've got a mic over here. Yeah, gentleman here. I'll take one more.
Hello, David Harrison from London Living Streets. The Manuals for Streets has been out for about 10 years, which was a design guide to get more walking and active travel. The Urban Design Group is doing a superb piece of research that shows it's been completely ignored by county councils. What should be done about this? Should activists be taking the county councils to judicial review, as Client Earth has done with quality?
Okay, responses?
Well, you're giving us a hard time here.
There we go. Dense questions, those, weren't they?
Some nice, light, jolly ones. Goodness me, Lynda can answer all these.
Thank you.
It's really tricky.
Right. Oh, you really mean it seriously? Oh, okay, fine. Taking the last point first, Manual for Streets, there is a lot of pressure to update it because it is out of date, it needs to be revised. But you're absolutely right, it's not being used as it should be used by many authorities and many professionals. I think one of the best things the activists could do is actually is back to your politicians. If the politicians understand what's in these documents, then they might actually put pressure on the officers. Because at the moment, the pressure on the officers from the work that I do with local authorities and with engineers and transport planners is the pressure is the reverse. The pressure is about providing for the car, particularly in county councils. The car is king, and most of the people, with due respect to them, who are the politicians, are quite often fairly mature. She says as a fairly mature person, and have grown up in the day when the car was the status and everybody had a car, and they haven't really adjusted at county council level to what needs to happen. Part of what we want to do in the transport planning work day that I've talked about earlier is actually start to change that with politicians and with officers. So we're going to be doing some work with local authorities at county council and other levels to try and get them to understand the wider agenda and own the values. Who knows whether we'll win, we just keep trying. Housing demand is an opportunity. At the moment, it's been a disaster. It's not providing a walking environment for anybody, by and large. They are housing estates with roads and footpaths, if you're lucky. So I think it's a real opportunity, but again, we have to make sure that the planning framework within which the decisions are determined is the one we need, and then it's reinforced persistently, and there's a lot of argument with politicians if it doesn't. I'm not aware of the value of car parking philosophy that was mentioned, and nor am I particularly familiar with London being a national park, so I don't think I can comment on either of those because they're not something I'm familiar with. The bridge between school travel and travel planning. I think the whole philosophy of travel planning has come into disrepute, I think, is fair enough. And part of that, and I'm the person that wrote the national guidance on travel planning some years ago for the government. I think it's fallen into disrepute because it's just seen as a greenwash. I've done a travel plan, tick box, and forget about it. Again, we've got to change hearts and minds, and it's about actually starting at the bottom and making sure that the walking routes to schools exist, and that the transport authority that's responsible, whether it's a local authority or a county council, is actually listening to the parents and listening to the governors. And I think some of the best things you could do is get the governors to really start making a noise and the parents to start making a noise. Because all of these things will change if people shout loud enough and long enough and continuously. They're not going to happen if people don't say anything but just mutter to each other. So I think it's raising the agenda, using living streets, using any other opportunity, and raising the agenda up the political profile.
Thank you. Right, organisers, have we got time for another round, or do you want to?
Yeah, one more round.
One more round. Only one full stop allowed. Okay.
Can we have some for Lucy
nice,
time, please?
What's Lucy's favourite street? That would be a nice one.
Easy ones.
Okay, the gentleman here has been very patient.
Well, that would be a difficult one.
I'm going to ask you simply. Development plans are obliged to have citizen participation. Transport plans are not. How do citizens get into the process of making suggestions, vetting plans before they actually become cast in stone?
Okay. Yeah. At the back there.
David Davis and Pax, a relatively easy one for Lucy, I think. How will your healthy streets indicators actually be measured? Will it be volunteers going out to do the work? Will the boroughs or TfL go out and do the work? And just how accurate does it have to be?
Last one.
Hi, I'm Charlie. I'm Charlie Fox. I'm from Inspire London. I'm an artist, and I do walking because it's exciting and enjoyable. And so my question is, which is something that's come up, which Will Norman was talking about, is to make walking more compelling. How would you, 3 things to make walking more enjoyable or compelling?
Good questions, those, aren't they? Right. Lucy, no escape.
Okay, so for the first one, in London, any transport project that's been put into the public domain for consultation by Transport for London, if it costs more than £200,000 to deliver, and that might seem like a lot of money, but for a transport project coming out of TfL, that is most things apart from moving the odd lamppost around, they all have to be published with their Healthy Streets check results in the consultation materials so that you can see what the street was like on its baseline score, what their proposal is, and you can ask them to provide you with the detailed scoring that they've done, so you can really get into the detail and say, we don't think this is acceptable, we think you could go further. So it's a really good opportunity for you to really get much more involved at that stage before they've fixed their plan of what they're going to do. For the Healthy Streets check, for the Healthy Streets monitoring, we're using a range of different ways to track our progress against the indicators. So for an individual project, we'll be using the Healthy Streets check for designers. We will also be doing some counts at the location, so we might do a pedestrian count and a cycle count. We'll be looking at what the expected difference in air quality is going to be. So we've got a range of things that we do for an individual project. And then we're also looking at what can we measure across the whole of London, so we can say for the whole of London between last year and next year, what the change is expected, and we have some of that already. So we track at a London level the physical activity levels, the walking and cycling levels, air quality, road traffic injuries. So we're developing quite a big, complicated system that will mean that we can measure things at quite a granular level right up to a very broad level as well. And it should be really transferable to other places so that others can adopt the same framework.
Great. Lynda?
Right. Sort of dealing with the development plan and the transport plan. Thanks for the question. There's a lot of authorities who do consult on their transport plan. It is not a statutory requirement, as you rightly say, but lots of authorities do, and they should. Certainly when I was a director, we consulted on it. But you do get consulted on the development plan, whether it's a strategic or a local. So it's very important to get the right transport elements into that, which is subject to consultation, even if you don't get the transport plan. But I think one of the best ways to make sure that the local authorities do engage with the community is actually be very active on social media. And again, it will make officers and members sit up and take notice. It's about being heard, get the papers, the newspapers, whatever, to say, this is happening, we need to be heard, and be really quite difficult about it if necessary. So I think that's part of what one can do, is actually use the opportunities to get the local authority to change their engagement process. And normally, I have to say, their engagement processes are not good. Public meetings aren't the best thing to do. They need to look much more imaginatively and not public consultation, but engagement. And that's what local authorities should be doing now. And if they don't do it at this stage, after all the years of engagement advice, I'm appalled. 3, what would I find most compelling? Right? The things that I really enjoy when I walk, and I do a lot of walking in London particularly, but elsewhere, is I love artwork. One of the things that I find really pleasant in London at the moment is the increasing level of sculpture and other artwork that's going on, or even things that pop up on the top of a building, Gormleys, figures, and then disappear, or an elephant, or a painted sort of box, a telephone box. So artwork, I think, really makes a difference. Secondly, landscape, good planting, good landscape treatment. And I think the other thing that I really enjoy is views. Actually, narrow views, wide views. Actually walking somewhere, you get these wonderful buildings. I love walking cities, looking at buildings, looking at spaces, and just enjoying the experience of being in that place, because the views, locally or further, are good.
Great, thank you very much. And when we applaud our panel for doing such a great job, we should also applaud them for the great job they do more widely in advancing the cause of living streets and the agenda that we all share. So, thank you very much.